Hello, and welcome to the Trans-Icelandic broadcast. I'm Andie Fontaine, news editor at the Grapevine, and joining me today is Alda Villiljós, and they are an artist and
witch,
business owner, and
business owner, many things,
and many things, many things indeed. And today we're going to be talking about non-binariness, the concept of being non-binary. On the show so far, we've talked a lot about the trans femme experience. However, I would like to go into a little bit about what it is to be non-binary, what it isn't to be non-binary, and some of the daily challenges that we face as non-binary people. Myself, I am a non-binary femme, which means, for me anyway, this means that while I will say that I'm a girl or say that I'm a woman, my gender identity I could probably best describe as being like female and something else, but not masculine, whichever it is. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and we'll get into that in a bit. Alda, would you like to talk a bit about your gender identity?
Yeah. Just like my title, I have a hard time explaining it. It's hard to find like a single word that encompasses it in my experience. For me, anyway.
Yes.
Most of the time, I will say that I'm genderqueer. Sort of fluid, I guess. So, I mean, it does change a little bit, but most of the time, I'm gender neutral. So, most of the time, I don't feel like I fit the sort of box of being a woman or of being a man. I'm sort of neither. Just maybe something else. I don't know. I haven't heard a good term for that yet. But yeah, mostly neutral.
Yeah, so as you see, like, just two non-binary people in this room are experiencing two completely different gender identities because that's how wide an umbrella they can be.
Exactly.
And one of the ways that I wanted to illustrate this point is with one of the non-binary flags. You'll be able to see this on video, but for those listening, this is one of the non-binary flags with 4 stripes, ranging from yellow at the top, then white, and then purple, and then black. And the yellow, as I read about it anyway, it's a primary color. It is not a mix of red and blue. It's to represent genders that are outside of the binary altogether. White is representation of having many, as like white light is a combination of all the different colors in the spectrum. Purple being a combination of red and blue. This is supposedly representative of those who are androgynous, which is not necessarily a 50-50 split of boy and girl. Like, there's people who might say that they're 60-40 or 90-10 or
different shades of purple.
Yes, or different shades of purple. Exactly, different shades of purple altogether. And then finally, at the bottom, there's black, which is for those who might be gender neutral, agender, neutrois, if that's pronounced correctly.
I would say neutral.
Neutral.
But
I like that much better.
It's just because I learned French.
I failed French. I did. So this flag I'm using as just as like a handy representation. And I'm sure that there's non-binary people out there who would say that they're not necessarily represented by any of these colors on the flag. It's just like a handy shorthand for non-binariness altogether. The reason why I wanted to discuss this topic in particular is because it's well, when I initially came out as trans, I just said I was straight up non-binary, and I asked people to use the pronouns they, them, and their. In Icelandic, there's a special pronoun for this, which is hann, which is a sort of portmanteau French word for han and hun, or he and she, put together. However, a lot of people really had difficulty addressing me or talking about me in they, them, and their, which is odd considering that singular they has been around for much longer than singular you in the English language, and haun is not very difficult to decline in Icelandic. You would decline it as you would laun, for example, or raun. Alda, as I understand it, you have been sticking diligently
yes.
to haun and they.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that's been like for you? Because I just gave up. I got so tired of it.
Totally understandable. So back in 2014 is when I moved back to Iceland. I'd been living abroad for 6 years. In England and then in Sweden, and in both places, like, gender neutral pronouns were pretty known, so it wasn't a problem. But a few months before I moved back, I had to move back for financial reasons. I really had no choice, but I'd been holding off on moving back for a really long time because I knew that there was no language for me in Icelandic. Like, yes, we're lucky in that we do actually have a neutral gender, which a lot of other languages don't have. They might only have female or male, like grammatical gender.
Yes.
We do have that neutral grammatical gender. However, you never use it for people unless you're like insulting them.
Right.
And even then, it's like, whoa, you don't do that. So I was like, so I decided to move back, and I decided, you know what, I need there to be some sort of language. And I started talking to my friends on Facebook and sort of trying to come up with Icelandic translations of multiple queer words, not just a pronoun, but also like words for genderqueer and for polyamory and like all these queer words that I was like, I'm using these words daily and I have no idea how to say them in Icelandic. There must be something. And most of them, there weren't any Icelandic words. Anyway, so me and another friend, we came up with haun, and I wrote an article about it for Knús, which is a feminist online article website, basically. And they published it, and then a few months later I moved back, and I was astounded at how many people were like, oh yeah, I've heard of that pronoun. I was like, you have?
So we have you to thank.
Yeah.
You and your friend for this pronoun.
I mean, I knew that the article had been shared, and also like that was how I got in touch with other non-binary people in Iceland, and I learned that like some people had been using other pronouns. He, here, I can't remember if there was another one. Then some people were using like thau, which is the Icelandic they, basically. But there's never been it's never been used in the singular in Icelandic,
right,
as it has been in English. So it's kind of it's a lot more complicated to use it in Icelandic.
And it's a gender neutral form of they.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
As opposed to þeir and thai.
Yeah.
Just so I understand it correctly.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Yeah. So thau is the gender neutral plural. Anyway, but through that article, I got in touch with actual non-binary people, and we started a group and you know, started talking together, and so that was amazing, and that was kind of what really helped me get through sort of getting used to being in an Icelandic speaking community again, because obviously, even though a lot of people had heard of it, like most people had problems with actually using it, and they would forget, and you know, and I had to be really diligent and like correcting people and getting up the courage to correct people.
Yes.
Jeez. It's really hard.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. Like being straight up misgendered, and being called a boy or referred to as he or something, I'm real quick at like correcting people on that and saying she or her. But for some reason, I felt this hesitancy about correcting people when I was using they exclusively.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Like today, I will use either she or they. I really leave it up to the speaker. I literally have no preference.
Okay.
But when I was using they, them, and their, I felt this hesitancy about it because I was like, am I being special? Am I asking for special treatment or something? Like,
and then you also like, you are interrupting the person who's speaking, and you know that there's a chance that you might be interrupting the person to actually start a whole new conversation about like, what is that? And then you have to explain, and then you're like, wow, I interrupted like this really interesting thing that you were saying just for this. And you do feel like you're kind of, you're putting yourself out there as well. You're like, hello, I'm here, like, pay attention to me because you're saying something wrong about me. I don't know, it's really hard.
It is. Well, it can be, yeah, for sure.
It depends on the people you're around. I remember the first time that I think it was the first time that I corrected an Icelandic person sort of mid-sentence, because usually I'll like wait a bit and then be like, by the way,
yes,
just to point out. But the first time I like interrupted a person who was speaking and corrected them, it was at Samtökin, the queer organization, and there was a night for like queer students or something, and I'd been invited along, and I was talking to this person, and I was like, oh, it's Haun actually. And he was like, oh my God, now I have to do 10 push-ups. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah, it's a rule we have. If you misgender someone, you have to do 10 push-ups. I'm really sorry. I was like, holy shit, okay.
I don't know.
I liked it because it was like, I was expecting something else, and it was actually kind of nice, and they were really good about it. And after that, like, I don't think they've ever misgendered me again. Like, they were just really good about it. But
on account of the push-up.
Yes, I was like, I should just implement that for everyone.
Yes, I mean, I can understand that. Like, personally, for myself, like, I don't like it when people, overly. Apologize anyway, because then it's like, now I have to make this person feel better.
Yeah, no,
about
totally.
A mistake that they made. Like,
it wasn't like that at all with that person. It was just like, oh no, I have to do 10 push-ups, and I'm like, I'm drinking beer, and I really don't want to do 10 push-ups.
That is funny though. That is like, if I like, and it's happened before that I've misgendered people as well.
Yeah, sure.
Like, I'm no angel in this matter.
Of course.
But my response is usually to thank the person.
Yeah.
So that, because
it's always the best one.
Yeah.
It's just say, oh, thank you for correcting me, and then keep on going.
Yes. Keep on going.
Don't make a big deal.
Yes, exactly. Like, I don't hate you for it.
Exactly.
It happens. That's all.
Exactly. You're not being mean, but people think you're being mean.
Yeah. I mean, no one wants to mess up, but it's interesting because there's something that comes up in a lot of trans discussions is comparing how people react when you correct them for misgendering you, as opposed to when you correct them for misgendering your pet.
Oh yeah,
like your dog or something. Like, if like, oh, what a good boy. Like, well, she's a girl actually. Oh, I'm so sorry.
God, I'm so sorry. How could I ever misgender your dog? And they're like, well, you...
Whereas opposed, like, I had corrected just like one freelancer at one point about my pronouns, and they got contrarian on me. I'm like, yeah, but does it matter really? I'm like, yeah, it kind of does. It kind of does, really. It's a pretty basic part of my identity, what my gender is, but... had, I'd been somebody's dog, it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, exactly. God.
But in any event, another thing that I'd like to talk about as well when it comes to the non-binary thing is one thing that pops up a lot is that this is some newfangled like trend that's been born from Tumblr or something like that.
It's a millennial thing.
It's a millennial thing. When in fact, like, non-binary gender identities have been around for, what, hundreds, thousands of years, perhaps?
I mean, as long as we have existed, I think. Trans and queer people are a part of history. It's just that we've been erased from history, so you never read about it. And it's only like in the past few years really that any proper research has been done to like dig up and uncover information about us as being part of that history. And I mean, genderqueer, non-binary people are definitely a part of that as well. A lot, like in a lot of cultures that have been colonized by white Europeans, we do see, like, even today, non-binary representations and genders that are sort of culturally accepted, but not like the sort of dominant white heteropatriarchy is trying to erase it. So,
such as, for example, in some Native American cultures.
Some Native American cultures, India, some other South Asian cultures as well. Yeah.
Yes.
South American cultures as well. Probably forgetting stuff, but.
And when settlers come, especially during the so-called Age of Exploration, representing the church, and the Christian church, as you might be familiar, holds fast to a binary of man and woman. And so when these colonizers arrived in these areas, like, the idea of there being anything but man or woman must have been confounding at best, and probably downright blasphemous and evil to them at worst.
And do you know, the sort of root of that sort of hatred for queerness actually comes from the time when the Israelites were, like, trying to find their holy country, like, way back in the day. They were, like, trying to find their place as a culture and as a religion and as a people. And they were trying to distinguish themselves from all the other cultures around. They were like, no, we're like, we believe in God, and we're like this, and we're like blah blah blah. And a lot of the cultures around them at that time were openly queer, didn't have a problem with queer people. So, like, the Jewish people at the time were like, oh, we're not like those Egyptian lesbians. No.
Okay.
We're like, no, straight, just man and woman, only that. We're not like those sodomites over there.
So the ancient Hebrews.
Yeah. And that's how, like, all of those laws in the Old Testament, like, why those laws were written. It was like, no, you can't partake in that queer cult over there. Like, you have to be a part of this cult.
That's really fascinating. It's kind of a testament to how much not only we as people, but, like, the faith has evolved as well. Like, I know Jewish non-binary people. Yeah,
no, totally. Like, after they actually found their country and settled, like, they became a lot more loose with all of those laws and rules, because they were like, well, now we can relax and now we can just be ourselves, because we don't have to, like, sort of box ourselves in with all these rules just to distinguish us from the others.
Yes.
Kind of thing. So
the Catholic Church, on the other hand,
went way too far with it.
Yes. Yeah, they need to relax. They definitely need to relax. As I was telling you earlier today, and even in some non-binary groups that I'm in, there seems to be a lot of confusion when you're someone like me and you introduce yourself as a non-binary woman. Because to a lot of people, even amongst people who are familiar with non-binary as a concept, there seems to be this overlying view that means you're either, 50-50 androgynous, or you're agender.
Yeah.
Altogether, and that's it. And it's frustrating to try to explain this, because these are, especially for a group of people who understand that, like, gender is a spectrum, not a gradient between male and female, but like a whole spectrum of colors,
exactly,
as it will. And so the way that I would personally, the way that I talk about it is, as I said, like, my gender identity as a lot of female, but there's a lot of something else that I don't identify as female and that I don't identify as masculine, it may be some sort of like agender, gender void type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It may be something else altogether that I just don't know how to describe. But it's definitely not masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And what, yeah, so it's because you'll also see like non-binary mask folks as well, but then there are of course people who are androgynous, the different shades of purple, as you had said, or people who believe that they're like or gender fluid, and like some days will wake up feeling more masculine and other days feeling more feminine, and that might change throughout the day.
I think part of it is maybe because non-binary people are more used to describing ourselves as feminine or masculine rather than woman or man. So maybe that's what people are more used to, and then they sort of stop and like, wait, what? When you say non-binary woman? And I mean, I think part of that is just because we've had to... Like, there's been such a long fight for being like, no, we're not a woman, we're not a man, we're something else. And now that we've sort of got that idea across, we can finally start sort of saying, well, non-binary women and non-binary men, instead of just being like, I don't know, masculine of center or something.
So you think it would be less confusing to say non-binary femme?
To a lot of people. Yeah, I think so. But I also think like that it's important to actually introduce this idea that you can be a non-binary woman. But I think that's just where, I mean, I would think that's where a lot of the confusion might come from.
It seems to be, because in a lot of the responses to it, they're like, it seems contradictory altogether. I mean, woman is one of the binary genders. How can you be non-binary woman? And so, yeah, when I try to break it down in the way that I do, then people are like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it might, I mean, yeah, it might be a question of vocabulary.
Yeah,
given that
maybe.
we do have those sort of connotations. But I do agree with you that it is important that we introduce this concept as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've been finding really encouraging is to see like a little bit more non-binary representation amongst public figures.
Yeah, definitely. And
do you think that this...
sorry, brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've been curious about this, though, is like... Because you'll have people talking about a particular non-binary person or someone who's just come out as non-binary in the media, and then it seems like we have to have this discussion all over again about what it means to be non-binary and why, yes, singular they is a thing. And just as a sidebar to that, Richard Stallman, I don't know if you're familiar, he pretty much helped create GNU with Linux.
Okay.
One of like this brilliant man in the field of computer science. Anyway, for some reason though, he felt compelled to pen a 1,200-word essay on why he will never, ever accept they as a singular pronoun. And he
probably uses it without thinking about it.
Yes, that's exactly the point I was getting to. Like, hey, someone called for you. Oh yeah, what did they want? Boom, you've just used singular they.
Exactly. I need to go to the doctor. I really hope they'll be able to help me.
Yep.
Like...
It happens. It happens all the time.
What other word do you use? Like, do you just like, no, what did
he or she
the caller want? Like,
what did he, she, or some other gender have to say about it?
Exactly.
That's too clunky. That's why we have this they as a singular. That's, as I've said, has been around before you was a singular pronoun.
Yeah. But it's something we use without thinking about it. And like a lot of the time, as soon as you point it out to people, they're like, oh wait, yeah, okay, I do use it. But they don't think about it sort of consciously.
Mm-hmm. No,
so
they
it's
don't.
kind of weird.
But what really astounded me about this is that, like, you know, Stallman is not alone in this. We also have, like, such great minds as Jordan Peterson, for example.
Oh, jeez.
Yes. Big fan. Get well soon, Jordan. Who, like, have, like, railed against this. They get so angry about singular they, and I just see this and I just shake my head. I'm just like, what stakes do you have in this?
Yeah.
You know? Like,
how does this even affect your life?
Exactly. It really blows my mind. Like, I understand if someone's confronted with a new topic or a new concept that doesn't quite fit into their worldview, you, like, I mean, it's kind of a natural defensive reaction on a psychological level to be defensive about it, to resist it. But, you know, eventually, I would hope, anyway, most people will, like, accept new information. I've never been able to get my head around people who just dig in their heels and like push back against it, especially when they have zero stakes in it whatsoever, and it costs them literally nothing to use these pronouns.
Exactly.
So this is why I'm imploring you, viewers and listeners, if they, them, and their confounds you and you find it confusing, practice using it. Think about, like, the times that you've used singular they, them, and their in your speech. Pick some person that you don't interact with and, like, imagine referring to them as they, them, and their. And I assure you, like, after a while, it's gonna start feeling pretty natural. Like, because there's people out there that use this pronoun, and, like, whether we like it or not, like, it's a part of the English language.
Exactly. So, I sometimes tell people, like, you're welcome to just, like, talk about me as much as you want, just to practice. But I mean, you can also just pick a stranger in the street and be like, oh, I like their coat, or something. And that's a practice as well. Sit in a cafe and just, like, describe something about every person you see with a neutral pronoun. That's a practice.
I tend to do that, like, before I know somebody's gender. Like, especially in somebody in the queer community.
Yeah.
Because you never know.
Yeah.
So I'll just default to they, them, and their until somebody will tell me, like, this person uses masculine pronouns or feminine pronouns.
So you have a chance to ask or be corrected. Yeah, definitely. Just like you can't guess someone's name from looking at them, you can't guess someone's pronoun. Yes.
That is an excellent comparison. You're not, like, if I introduced myself as Andie Sophia, and someone was like, no, your name's Gretchen.
I've decided.
No, it's Andie Sophia. It's like, no, I don't like that name. I don't accept that. Sorry, you're Gretchen.
Doesn't fit you. No.
That would just be so weird.
Exactly.
When you put it that way, yeah. Wow. In terms of names, that's a great thought exercise to use.
Yeah, definitely. Not my original idea. I did steal it from the internet, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think it does too. There's, now for myself, like, not to make, like, my gender identity, like, an extremely long label, but you'll see on my Facebook bio, for example, it says non-binary trans woman. The trans part, for this is a little bit contentious, like, slightly so. Generally speaking, if you are not the gender that you are assigned at birth, you are trans. Yeah, that's kind of like a good shorthand for it, but it is shorthand. There are some non-binary folks who do not identify as trans person.
Yes, and while I haven't spoken with all of them, every single person I've spoken to who hesitates to use the trans label, who is non-binary, has had a bad experience with binary trans people, with trans women and trans men not accepting them. And I think that is the main reason, maybe not the whole reason, there might be other reasons out there, I don't know. But I think that is the main reason for why some people don't like to be called trans when they're non-binary. And thankfully in Iceland that hasn't been a problem, at least not in the last few years.
Right.
It might have been like before, like since I came back, the trans community has been super accepting here. They like reached out and were like, hey, do you want to come and be part of this and help us be more inclusive and et cetera, et cetera. So the trans community here has been really amazing, but I know that in so many countries, in so many cities, in so many towns, internet communities as well, you'll find a lot of hostility from trans men and women who maybe don't understand what non-binary is, and many of them, I think, feel like because they don't understand that it's an identity in and of itself, that it is a gender, they feel like either that we are sort of making fun of them, or that we are undermining their efforts, that we are sort of saying that all of them are non-binary as well.
Yeah.
Which is not the case, obviously.
No, it's not the case. But I think you raise a very, very good point, though, because I have noticed this myself as well. From binary trans people. And what I find really startling is it reminds me of the discourse about bisexuals in the 90s. Like, when I was still pretending to be a boy back in the 90s, I also identified as bisexual. And it was really interesting because sometimes the reactions I got from gay people were more hostile than I got from straight people. Like, I had a gay man straight up tell me to my face that actually I can't say how he precisely put it, but he had in his exact words for this channel anyway, without it being marked for 18 plus. But what he basically insinuated was that I was just messing around with guys until I met the right girl.
Right.
You know? That I was just...
That's actually more rare, because most of the time it will be like, you're just messing around with girls until you meet the right guy. Yeah. You can't, like, come out of the closet yet. Whereas by women, it's more usual, like, oh, you're messing around with girls until you meet the right man. It's always about the men.
I was told I was being trendy. I was told I was playing it safe. I was told I was trying to have the best of both worlds. And so when I see like a lot of the discourse about non-binary people from binary trans people, I'm like, this sounds real familiar.
It's funny, not funny, how we always revert back. Like, this is exactly what people were saying when BDSM Iceland was accepted as a part of the queer umbrella. Like, it's what was said about trans people, about intersex people, about bi people, about everyone. And this is exactly the same things that the cis-het community was saying about gay people.
Gatekeeping.
Yeah, it's basically, and it's up to a certain point, I can kind of understand where they're coming from, because I think it is a case of, we fought really hard to finally get to this place where we are accepted, and then you're threatening the stability of that, because people might not accept you, and then by extension not accept us again.
Right.
So I can kind of understand where that fear is coming from.
Yeah.
Which doesn't excuse the behavior, obviously.
No.
But it might explain where it's coming from, and I think that helps in order to actually dig at the problem and be like, hey, Definitely it's okay, like, we're not here to ruin things for you.
No.
We're in the same place that you were.
Like, there's not a maximum capacity for the queer community. Like,
this isn't a cake.
Right. It's not a nightclub. Like, we can accept more people.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And we'll only grow stronger.
I think a lot of it, this is just speculation on my part, I'm not an anthropologist, but I think a lot of it is also reflective on, it's kind of like this internalized queer phobia that just reflecting on or absorbing and internalizing messaging that come from cishets. Like in the 90s, all of a sudden, like bisexual people were on the cover of Time. And like billed as this brand new sexual orientation that had never existed before, and now everyone's doing it.
Sure.
Yeah. We had movies like Fatal Attraction, or no, Basic Instinct.
Yeah.
Basic Instinct, that's one. Sharon Stone, plays a bisexual woman. And so bisexuality was all of a sudden, being commodified and used for marketing purposes, as rainbow capitalism tends to do.
Yeah.
And
as we're doing with non-binary people now.
Yeah. And this fomented a lot of resentment within the queer community. But this resentment was misdirected.
Yeah.
What they were actually resentful of was the commodification of queer identities and for profit. Instead, they directed it towards bisexual people. And I feel that like a lot of that is happening now,
also,
too.
like a part of it might also be, why didn't we get this treatment? Why weren't we celebrated when we came out? I think part of it is that as well. It's sort of this internal jealousy that you can't even put into words because you're not sure where it comes from. Because it's muddled up with all of what you were saying as well. Yeah. It's a lot of different feelings.
This is definitely true. Because I just often feel like I exist in both worlds.
Yeah.
Like, I often just say I'm a trans girl as shorthand because it's just easier. And so, like, I'll see, like, representation, as we talked about in the last podcast, representation of binary trans people that is both good and bad. And the good will give me a feeling of euphoria. The bad will make me want to throw my laptop out the window. And so seeing the non-binary identities come up as well, like, that gives me, like, this real warmness, like, but still, like, with a question mark. Like, one of the, in the representation podcast, we talked at length about She-Ra, Princess of Power. In particular, the character Double Trouble. Yeah. They're non-binary. And when I heard, like, oh, there's going to be a non-binary character on a cartoon, yay! And then it's like, oh, of course they're a villain.
Oh, yeah.
But Cyborg had a really interesting take on this when they were talking about it. Like, there's like, no, Double Trouble is not a villain, they're a survivor. They do what they can to survive.
Okay.
And because they're so marginalized. There's no one like Double Trouble in the She-Ra universe.
Okay. Yeah. I guess. But it's also like,
yeah.
There's such a long history of queer people in general being cast as the villain.
Yes.
Like, Disney did this for so long with their villains being very, like, they were male but very feminine in some aspect. Or, like, Ursula from The Little Mermaid, being based on a drag queen. And it's sort of like, if we're there, we're always the villain. But obviously nowadays, I think we're getting more nuanced stories where it isn't just like good and bad. No. Like, the villains aren't just like bad people. It's like, oh no, they can be helped.
Yes. Or they're damaged or traumatized.
Yeah. Like, they're acting this way because of something that happened, and like, you can actually help them. Like, there's always like this promise of becoming a good person, basically.
Yes. And so that's, yeah. This is one of the things that's been really interesting about the non-binary discourse within the trans community in particular, is that, a lot of non-binary people feel overlooked. I've noticed, because like, even like in like shit posting groups where we're like sharing memes with one another, it seems that most of these memes are either for trans boys or trans girls, Because they'll relate specifically to the experience of being a trans woman or the experience of being a trans man. And then the non-binary people in this group are like, what about where are memes? That's why, I mean, and I'm not saying that like memes are like
but
the life bread per se, but it's
an important mirror in today's society.
It is. And it's just one example of like how like within the trans community, like we'll feel overlooked, whereas like to a lot of binary trans people, we're clamoring for attention and like sucking all the oxygen out of the room.
Totally.
Very different lived experiences, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think with the memes, but I mean, with media representation in general, there is also, because all the language around non-binary identities is so new, and it's been changing so much in the last few years. Like, since we started coming sort of out and being like, hey, we're here and we have these words, so many of the words and like the flags and everything, it's all changed so much and so quickly. And I think people who aren't a part of this community, and even people who are part of this community, are scared that they'll say something that, oh, it was like, this word was cancelled yesterday, you didn't hear? Okay.
Really?
You know?
Okay.
Because like, oh, you used the wrong word, and it's just because you hadn't heard that there was a new word, or that this word was problematic in some way. So I think there's a fear of sort of getting it wrong. But then obviously if like that becomes an excuse as well.
Yeah, this does happen. Like, oh, you gotta walk on eggshells these days. You can't say anything anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know. The way that I've always looked at it is that, like, I think most people like to think of themselves as good people.
Yeah, of course.
And so...
we're all the heroes in our own stories.
Yes. Most people like to think of themselves as good people. And to make a mistake is a reflection of not being a good person, as opposed to just being a human being who is imperfect and flawed and prone to mistakes. Yeah. Whereas, so that if you make a mistake, some of these people will take it as like a personal indictment on their character, right? As opposed to a teaching moment where they're learning something new.
Yeah. It's just like when you point out that someone did something kind of racist, and they're like, I'm not a racist. And you're like, well, I'm not saying that you're a bad person. You just did something that was kind of racist. Yeah. So, but people equate the two. They're like, if I'm a racist, then I might as well just go join the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah. Like, if I said that's it. If I said one thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's that famous video, like now famous video from Jay Smooth, where he made the distinction between what you said was racist and you're a racist for saying it. Yeah. You know? Is people can use like particular concepts or words without any intent whatsoever of saying something racist or sexist or queerphobic that are nonetheless racist, sexist, or queerphobic. Exactly. And if you're corrected on that, like, I get it. Like, there's a tendency to feel like, but I'm a decent human being. Like, I'm not racist, I swear. Like,
exactly. No, exactly.
I'm not queerphobic, I swear that.
Thing.
As opposed to just being like, oh, I didn't realize my mistake. I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting me. And then
there's a humility that you kind of have to get used to, I think. Mm-hmm. And that takes a really long time. Like, the first time that you kind of accept that you are racist or queerphobic or whatever, you kind of have to own it, and you have to sit with it, and you have to be like, okay. I mean, I remember when I had to, I think, I can't remember what was the first thing that kind of broke this barrier for me, but say racism. Mm-hmm. I have to accept that I was brought up in a primarily white community on an island, and that I was brought up in a really racist community, and that I've internalized all of these ideas about race that aren't true. And I have to kind of sit with that and then go, okay, so how can I do better? Instead of reacting with like, no, I'm good, I'm okay, you know. And that's a really tough thing to do, especially for the first time.
Yeah.
And then it gets easier and easier, and then you're like, oh shit, I did something ableist. Okay, I'm good. I'm gonna do better now.
Absolutely. And that's what I hope people take away from learning about the concept of non-binariness.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, if we unfortunately like live in a we live in a cis heteronormative society, but we also live in a very binary society. Like, it is difficult, especially if you've got this bone structure, to be out on the street and not be clocked as either male or female. Very few people, I think, are able to pull off like that level of gender confusion in the cis.
Yeah.
And so if, you know, you've clocked somebody as male or female, first of all, try not to do that.
That's a really tough thing. I still do it, but you know, you try.
I know it's really hard. Like, it's not an indictment on you as a human being. Yeah. It's rather an indictment on the society that we live in that has conditioned you to look at people in this way. Yeah. Okay? Definitely. So if you come into contact with a non-binary person and they've corrected you on their pronouns, thank them for it. I would also like highly recommend like reading up some more about like what the concept of non-binariness is. Like the gender wiki is a good starting point. There's a lot of links in the article about non-binary on the genderwiki.com that can take you in good directions in terms of where to go.
I recommend thegenderbook.com. It's a really good, it's a whole book that you can download as a PDF, and it's very interesting, and it's beautifully set up with lots of illustrations, and it's made by queer people as well. Yeah. So I really like that one. Okay. And then just sort of take a minute to sit with it by yourself at first. Go through like, okay, so how has society conditioned me to like not accept this, and learn about it. And then if it's a person that you're regularly in contact with, then maybe contact them and be like, hey, can I ask a few questions about non-binary or about like your gender identity or whatever. Don't just go like, hey, so I have a question, bah. Yeah. Like, that's kind of rude. And it also gives us the opportunity to sort of like, oh, okay, maybe that question is going to come off as really like transphobic. So I can just like put up my guards, my mental guards, and be like, okay, I'm ready. Shoot.
Yes. I think that's important, you know, and just, I mean, no one's asking you to like get a PhD in gender studies in order to understand these things, because you don't need one. No. But yeah, those are some resources that are available to learn more about non-binariness, in addition to just knowing, like asking, if you know non-binary people, ask them if you can ask them some questions. And just in general, I would say like accept the fact that we're here and we've been here.
And give us the opportunity to maybe say no. Yeah. If you ask, like, can I ask you some questions? And we're like, do you know what? Not right now. Maybe later. Or maybe never. You have to ask someone else. Yeah. They're not obliged.
That'll also happen too. But in the general sense, like, I think that if you come from the place of just believing that non-binary people are real, that's a good starting point. Exactly. That it's not like a trend. It's not something that came out of Tumblr. It predates the gender binary, as just as they, them, and their predates singular you. I think that's a good starting point, because really we just want to live our lives authentically, and I think that most people, as I said, want to be decent people and want to be decent to other people. So I think that that's a good starting point. But it looks like we're out of time here, so I want to thank you again for joining the Trans Icelandic broadcast. I'm Andie Fontaine.
I'm Alda.
And thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.